My early years, I think, I always say one of my earliest memories is standing in a bucket on a chair while our home was flooding. And I think I must have been about 2 or 3 years old. At the time, we were living in a stable, myself, my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my 3 sisters. And we were there after my parents had been forcibly removed from where they had lived before. Well, according to my eldest sister, my first act of protest was us as siblings deciding not to eat a chicken that we believed to be our pet, but which my father had slaughtered for lunch. I do remember the incident of of us not eating the chicken. It felt, even then, it felt more like it was the right thing to do than it was a protest. So I feel like, from the time I was 13, pretty much to date, but certainly for about the next 10 years, there was an intensive kind of educating of myself by other people, and then also of my own accord, around the world that we live in, and how to make sense of that, how to think about it differently, how to think about it critically. There was a massive control of information to people, so you couldn't read anything. There was a lot of censorship of the literature available to people, or the visual materials that we could read, and even the names we could utter eventually. As people got banned, it became a crime to say their name. To say Nelson Mandela's name was a crime for which you could be jailed. Because what was necessary was for us to believe that we were inferior, and we needed then to obliterate, the state needed to obliterate evidence of black people arising to any kind of stature, making any kind of meaningful contributions. And certainly also it needed to obliterate any evidence of black people overcoming injustice, or of any people overcoming injustice. And so, everything became banned: poetry, plays, songs, sometimes even just things that were marginally suggestive of, equality of human beings would be banned, because they just needed to close up any space for people to think that they were equal and that they could attain sort of any other station in life than what the government was trying to set out for them. So, yeah, and these things would be banned on a continuous basis. It would you'd just hear. Yeah, I was involved in sort of student politics, the youth politics, the UDF, and then the women's movement, all at different points in time, and sometimes all at the same time. Lots of meetings. We also did all these night escapades, sneaking out to go and spray paint things on walls. We got arrested doing that, or others would get arrested doing that. And we had our ways of trying to kind of pretend that's not what we were doing, to look like we were just going clubbing, like all the other young people on the street at 2 a.m. in the morning. But the police would sometimes know those things. Depending on how you were arrested, you may not have been put with political prisoners in the prison, and that was also intentional, because it was meant to intimidate us and scare us. The second time when I was arrested, they took me to Belleville cells, and again it was, I think I'm a young kid, a girl. And the intention, I think, was really to kind of, scare the living daylights out of you so that you would reveal information to kind of protect yourself. I also remember, the experience of arriving at Paulsmoor and having to strip down and be strip searched with no privacy. So literally, today that would not happen to a prisoner. because we have human rights, which we fought for. So for anyone who thinks the country hasn't changed for the better. But for a young girl who at that point, I wasn't sexually active. I don't think I'd even had a boyfriend at that point yet. To have to take all your clothes off. And I never had a brother either. So to have to take all your clothes off in front of everyone and bend or do all kinds of things and be poked and prodded. And it was all just designed to rattle you and break you. And then inside the prison, to fear for your safety, because you're vulnerable. No one's coming to see you. They don't know you there. Or you don't know if they know you there. You would only know when a lawyer arrives. In my case, a lawyer never arrived. And I remember also the first time I was released from prison. Even that was a terrifying experience, because they came for me. They came and fetched me out of my cell at 10 p.m. at night and said, come, and put me in a van. And now we knew that people were being murdered in prison. People were being disappearing. And so at 10 in the night, also I was a child that was afraid of the dark. So that fetching me at 10 at night, I'm in the back of a police van and we're just driving around and I don't know what the hell's going on. I remember that. And then at some point the doors open and they just say, get out. And I think, well, okay, this is the part where I'm about to disappear, And after a few minutes, I realized I'm standing in front of our home. And this is how I got released. It was like one final act of, I feel like, terror against me in that moment. So this was the kind of like ridiculous brutality that police would put us through. I think unnecessarily so, but all designed to intimidate us into kind of to cooperate with them or to cease the kind of actions we were involved with. People died, other people went missing, other people, were seriously damaged through the torture they experienced in prison. I think I was lucky, Some people's households were constantly monitored. I don't think our house was monitored to the same extent, because we were able to have a lot of meetings there. But we kept also getting arrested at home. And so eventually, my sister Charlene and her husband went on the run and were underground. I know for a period of time I had to be on the run and underground. And that was when our other sister Lorna was in like 2 long stays in Section 29 in prison. So maybe I should revise that. I think our house was under surveillance and wasn't safe. We had to go on the run at times, both my older sister and myself. And there were times when I think when we surely would have been arrested more had we stayed home.
Right, thank you. What were some of the lessons from that period that you've carried into your current?
I mean, for me, the big thing is that we can change the world. And it's impossible for me to be despaired about our country now. It's impossible because we are the people who overthrew apartheid. So, and as bad as we may think our country is now, this is not apartheid. And we have a right to organize. We have a right to share information. We have a right to protest. So to bring about change now, in an age of technology even, where it's so easy to rally and rally people together and share information, is more possible, I think, now than ever before. So it's just about how much do we want the change. But to me, that's sort of the most amazing thing. So even though I feel when I speak to my generation and the older generation, we're often despaired about the future of the country, and we kind of feel like, things are not looking good. But I think about younger people now, and I think we've given them we've given them an example of what's possible with very little resources in an incredibly oppressive environment. So I think for a young person on South African soil or African soil today, with the technology that's available and the skills young people have, I think we've shown them that change can happen, if you're determined enough, if you're prepared to do the work. And maybe my generation, we've done our contribution now. I don't think so. I think we still have a lot to contribute. I'm still contributing. But I certainly feel optimistic because I believe that when young people get uncomfortable about the future enough, that they'll be able to bring about the change they want. And for me, that's the biggest lesson. That's the most exciting lesson coming from that. There's not a lot of countries are still sitting in their suffering, 30, 40, 50 years later. And we took a long time to get to that point where we brought about that regime change. More regime change will come. We'll keep changing. The world will keep changing. And it will always be changing for the better.